Welcome to ESG Decoded. I'm your host, Amanda Hsieh. Thank you to our returning listeners for coming back and listening to another episode. And welcome to anyone who's new to the podcast and downloading and listening for the first time. I'm excited to be speaking with Carrie Vollmer-Sanders today. She is a sixth-generation farmer and the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Action's Sustainability Director. She helps to lead the Decade of Agriculture efforts in advancing U.S. agriculture's triple bottom line of social, environmental, and economic objectives, including the Ag Investment Accelerator and Honor the Harvest. She is the recipient of the White House Champion of Change Award in 2014 for her leadership in developing the 4R Nutrient Stewardship Certification Program while at the Nature Conservancy. She also serves on the board of Edon Farmers Co-op Board, previously served on the U.S. EPA Science Advisory Board and the Michigan Farms Bureau. Carrie, I don't know how you find time to do it all. That's number one. But welcome, and thank you for making time for this.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. And I have a great calendar and an amazing husband and children.
I'm excited to be talking with you today because so many, I think, companies are looking to sustainable and regenerative agriculture to help lower the overall carbon footprint of their products. And whether that is perhaps a renewable, like a biofuel, or maybe it's something that's has a food ingredient to it, or maybe it's a textile, but something that's that grown basically. And so I'm really happy to be speaking with you about, what you're seeing from a different perspective of a supply chain as these companies and brands are setting these kind of net zero, carbon neutral goals for their company and also for their products.
Yeah. So what's really great is, if you look at where we have come in the sustainability world in talking about carbon, the conversations have really changed over the last 20 years. The beginning of my career till now has just been unbelievable amount of change. When I first started talking with people about what carbon was, farmers actually, they couldn't grasp what it was that we were trying to talk with them about. We were talking about, putting your land in pasture, and they're like, what? I don't get it, and I don't think we all got it really. Like it has taken baby steps over time. And then, 7 years ago we had the Paris Agreement, and right now we're 7 years from that agreement and 7 years till the 2030 goals. So we're a halfway point right now. And the conversations have been much more positive, much more, solutions oriented. And I think we're now at this influx where we're now starting to talk about, companies are looking at their footprint, and they're understanding, okay, we have a footprint where a lot of it is coming from ingredients. And those ingredients or packaging, it could make up between 20 and 97% of their footprint. So they're paying attention, trying to figure out what's next and how to engage. And that's really exciting. It can also be a little bit scary for the ag community when you think about, they're going to set these goals, and what does that mean? Does that mean that you're still going to buy my corn? Does it, or you're going to tell me that I have to grow my corn in a specific way, or you won't buy it? And so this is, we're at this great place where the dialogue is starting to happen, though, and farmers are being brought to the table. That's one of the roles of USFRA, is to make sure that farmers are involved in those conversations. So it is a collaborative effort. It is a dialogue about how we can do this together. And it's not just the companies trying to come up with, things on their own. And it's really understanding what it takes to make change happen.
I think about, what we're trying to do as a society or economy, or, really is to do this huge transition, includes everyone, and how do we get everyone coordinated and kind of moving in the same direction, but also sharing what are our challenges to getting
Yeah.
to where we want to get to go to, but and the importance of kind of collaboration and communication in order to really, I think, achieve the goals that we all want to achieve, but it's just not always easy getting there. And how do we facilitate those conversations? What I learned from you is that the supply chain is really longer than other supply. So you may have what I'm buying as a consumer, whoever's selling that to me, it's a very many steps back to where you get to the farmers and ranchers.
So just to explain that a little bit more, if you're buying something in the store that might have soybean oil in it, or even the bread that you're eating, the company that is making that bread, they don't really know which farm field the wheat came from. They're buying it from the wheat miller. The wheat miller is buying it from the local elevator or co-op, and the local elevator and co-op is getting it from the farmer. Now that's just bread. It has one of the shorter supply chains, but if you think about the process, you know the I'll just stick with bread. If you know where the footprint for the bread is, the difficulty is the relationship isn't with the bread company and the farmer. So you have to continue that conversation, that dialogue, to make the whole food system more transparent. And that's one of the things. We have an event every year called Honor the Harvest, and we try to bring together everybody in the supply chain. One person from members of the supply chain, we bring them to a farm or a ranch, and the focus is to have a dialogue. What do we need to do? What can we do? And it's one of those places where you hear more information, you get some new conversation going, some new data, you hear information about new technologies, and then you talk about it within your table, within your pod. And the focus is twofold. One, really have great conversations about what can we do, solutions oriented, and you're starting to build trust amongst the people that are sitting at that table. And when you can build trust, then you can build conversations that lead to collaborations. And it's when we take that information and then act on it that really is going to make a difference. And this year we talked about three different things. We focused on the science. What does the science say? What are the new technologies coming out that are going to help farmers and ranchers have a smaller footprint? We talked about transformative investment. Farmers can't do this alone. They can't make the changes without some capital assistance, and what the reasons are. And the third thing that we talked about was thinking about the next generation of agriculture leaders. And how do we continue to keep them engaged no matter when they enter the food system, the ag system, and how do we keep that education going? So where do they learn about sustainability? How do they learn about putting that into their budgets? How do they talk about that? And how could they, when thinking about the future, make sure that they're making smart economical decisions? At the same time, it's good for their bottom line and the rural economies that they work in.
What do you think is the kind of the biggest friction right now? Is it around technology? Is it around the science? Is it around the financing? I think those are, if I remember right, those are like the three big themes
Mm-hmm.
of
Yes, yes.
harvest. Is there one area where you're sensing more friction along this supply chain, or is it really kind of a combination of a little bit of everything?
So I think, well, everybody sees the need, right? So everybody is like wanting to move forward. And when I say everybody, like the food companies really would like to move forward. And then when you think about in the supply chain, all of the pieces along that supply chain, they're like, okay, we know that's coming. How do we do that? So everybody's trying to figure things out on their own. Um, and there has been some great funding from USDA. In the United States, we have like $3.1 billion that was put forward over a year ago for these public-private partnerships to help move forward U.S. agriculture. And so there is some funding there. I think the friction now is, all right, we know where we need to be. We need to talk with the farmers about, like, all right, what is the measurement? How do we measure progress? And then how do we tell that story, or how do we quantify that then for the end consumer? And that's, so it's, again, because we have this this long supply chain, sometimes the message or the quantification can get lost in the transition throughout the supply chain. But when farmers they're really good at figuring out a solution to whatever the issue is. You know, if that's one of the reasons why no-till got put in place, right? They figured out, okay, well, we need to have this different drill. John Deere came to the forefront, and we have this new drill. So now we don't have to till as much, so the soil can stay there. So we figured that out. The next part is, you know, how do we quantify how much carbon is being stored because we're not tilling? Well, you know, that science is really difficult, and it's hard to say year over year what that change is, because it's a natural system. We also have to understand it's not a building that we're taking these measurements in. You know, Mother Nature plays a huge role in what's happening in agriculture. And if you look, and in 2022, there was over $1 billion in climate disaster that took place, and it had nothing to do with what you and I were doing, but it had a lot to do with what was happening with Mother Nature. And so that's the conversation is now moving not so much from just like what's the carbon storage on your farm, but let's think about resilience. So when these climate disasters happen, how can your farm be better prepared for that climate disaster? And that in part is also helpful for the food companies, right? So if my farm's more resilient, then the wheat that goes into the goldfish crackers is also that supply is gonna be there. So I think that's the conversation now is how can we talk about the quantification of resiliency on a farm, and how do you what are the indicators that you're moving down that path? It has to be like annual indicators, or maybe every 18 months or 24 months, rather than, oh, you need to increase your soil organic carbon or soil organic matter. Well, you can't measure that for 5 or 7 years, you know, like you don't see the differences, but every little year, every bit helps to move forward there.
I think it's so complex in a way, and not only, as you mentioned, you know, how do we do this? What do we measure, and where do we get the funding for this? You mentioned the over $3 billion of money
Mm-hmm.
from USDA, and I guess is it sounds like a lot of money to me. I don't know if that's actually a lot of money when sometimes, you know, it sounds like a
Yes,
whole lot of
right.
money. I would like to win down the Powerball, but I actually don't know in the grand scheme of things.
Sure.
You know, is that enough? And also, if I understand right, that money goes towards certain activities, certain
Mm-hmm.
funds, certain specific things qualify.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, is it, I guess, enough? And is it really for, you know, the things that you're being asked to do? Is it included in those programs, that program or
Yeah,
another? I mean, some kind of
sure.
program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really good question, Amanda, and I think part of this is it's an experiment of sorts, right? So we there are some things when you talk with farmers about adopting these regenerative practices or climate smart practices, when you talk with them, that one, they're probably willing to adopt the technology if it's going to help them also in some way, right? And there's some sort of risk assurance there. And so I think there's like 70, there's over 70 different programs that are being put in place to take advantage of this USDA funding. So each one is a little bit different. And when you think about um, what needs to happen on a farm, probably there's some change that will happen, right? Like you're going to adopt something new. That's the deal with the grant. Who helps the farmer make that change? Where is where's the technical assistance in that change, and what does the technology cost? You know, I was talking with a farmer the other day, and they're like, I wouldn't ask you to give up 20% of your income to 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 try this new thing, and you're going to try it because, well, in 5 years you might make more money, and in the meantime the customer at the grocery store is going to like it. Well, I'm not going to give up 20% of my income for that. So sometimes you put things in perspective, like, all right, so what are the assurances that we're offering farmers, and what tools are we putting in place to help us adopt those new practices? And 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 sometimes it isn't necessarily a new practice, but thinking about the principle a little bit differently. So cover crops is often something that's suggested, and cover crops might work on my farm. I live in a place that is rain fed, works fantastic. It's a lot more labor in the fall to get them on the ground, but other places, they've had a drought and they can't get the cover crops to grow. So we're essentially telling someone to adopt a practice that isn't going to make any sense, right? And so maybe it's the principle that we need to focus on. And so the principle could be keep the land covered as much as possible. And that could mean that you spread out hay for the cattle. You just Farmers are really they're really smart. They're really innovative, and sometimes we just need to give them the problem and talk with them about the solutions that they could have. So I think the USDA money, that $3.1 billion is enough? No. But do I have a number that I think is enough? I don't know. Some say that there's $15 billion being invested in climate smart agriculture globally, and that needs to double or triple or quadruple. I don't know that we're going to know what the answer is. What I do know is we need to make the investments not just in the cost of the particular practice, but think about the principles as a whole, and think about what kind of assurances or assistance to help the farmer figure out how it's going to work on their land.
Something I think, in this case, obviously we're talking about agriculture, but I think what I'm hearing is also some challenges that I've heard in other supply chains too, of technology transfer,
Yes.
training,
Mm-hmm.
funding. Who's going to pay for all this in the end? And it's, yeah, sometimes there's tax credits and, grants and stuff. But a lot of times, how do we share the cost burden, but
Mm-hmm.
also, and that can be in so many ways. So it's almost like rethinking the way we finance our supply chains to really, to fund this change. And I can see that applicable to many other industries that I have the pleasure of speaking to people in a lot of industries, and I've heard that from other folks as well. This common challenge of we are looking at the same thing. We want to be more resilient and we want to address climate change, but then it gets to the real practical matter of,
Mm-hmm.
okay. And I think that goes back to your point of how we need really real dialogue to solve
Hmm.
this.
And I think, just to build on that for a second,
Yeah.
one of the things that I think that finance can help with is leveling the playing field when it comes to the size of operation. So it's not just the biggest farmers getting the funding, but looking across all size and types of farmers, so that everybody has a fair shake at becoming resilient, because we all need to get there. And that's the thing that, sometimes I worry about is, we're going to focus on these goals and we need all these acres. So let's just go to the largest farms first. And if we can get those largest farms, then it doesn't matter with what is happening to the smaller farms. And in agriculture, you know, it talked about these issues with climate disaster happening. It affects our well-being, so we need to be looking at all sizes of farms and helping all growers become more resilient. And I think finance is one of those ways that can kind of break down some of those walls.
What I hear the kind of the parallels to is really having a just and equitable transition to a low carbon
Yes.
economy. That was really how do we get everyone, not just some, but all,
Right. Right.
and really focusing right on the smaller businesses, on the smaller farms, on certain communities to make sure it really is all and not just some of us get to do this.
Hmm.
I think that's so important as well. Um, I'm also I'm in the back of my head, I'm also curious because our company Climeco, we work in the carbon markets, including nature-based solutions. In the back of my head, I'm wondering, wow, what kind of technologies are there? What kind of science is there for measuring, how much how much carbon trees are storing in the soil? How are we measuring that? What kind of technology, training capacity could we transfer from this kind of industry that I am in the ag and then ag back and forth, right? And how
Hmm.
can we
Hmm.
share? We're both working with natural environments where we don't necessarily have control of, exactly how much precipitation we're going to get, what kind of
Right.
storm is going to come our way, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
Yeah, in the back of my head, I'm like, how can our two communities, our two industries share and collaborate and help each other out?
Yeah, well, and that's a fantastic segue. Like, some of the conversations that we've been having are with companies like, um, Nutrient Ag Solutions. So they're working with farmers directly on fertility, on, so the essentially the vitamins that help the crops grow, right? The fertilizer that helps the crops grow. And there's companies like, Regrow, that are looking using satellite imagery to help measure how fast they're growing, and uh, how much uh, you know how much soil is covered. So I'm And NASA. I mean, we've been talking with NASA about some of the things they have, right? So there is this, like, excitement about how can we help. I think, the to your point, Amanda, is like, how do we get the right people in the room to have that dialogue so that we can learn from one another? And I've been looking at the healthcare world, like, what can we learn from healthcare in the ag sector? And I think there's something I keep going back to is, we have HIPAA in place for my personal health data. Should we have a HIPAA like program for my field data, so that I can sell my data to, like on HIPAA, I can sell it to the right people. I can share it with the right people, and then it's not just data; it's information, and we can do something with it. So I'm kind of excited about continuing that conversation. But again, I like, that's the beauty when you bring people together and really have that dialogue. It's more curiosity to help solve, rather than just a debate on what needs to happen next.
What are some other ways that brands, that companies can engage? You obviously mentioned harvest. That's, a big gathering, big event that happens. I'm guessing through the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers in Actions, what you lead as well through that organization. Is there somewhere, another venue or channel or somewhere else that you would recommend for brands and companies, biofuel companies, whoever they are, trying to engage their supply chain, agriculture supply chain, to get involved with?
So, well, there's a lot of organizations out there working in this space. So it kind of depends on where you're at in the discussion of climate change and what your goals are, where to go. Of course, we at U.S. Farmers and Ranchers are happy to help and point people to different places. When you think about getting into carbon markets or even water markets, ESMC, the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium, is a great place to go. They help with markets, putting them together and measuring it. USDA, again, they have this list of over 70 different programs that are happening already. Those organizations that are putting that together are likely to share what's going on, what lessons they're learning, and how they're moving forward. And depending on the commodity, so the ag space is just so exciting because it's never a dull moment. You always have something, but there's corn, soybeans, and pork that are working together, and they are working throughout the value chain. But those commodity organizations are the ones that are reaching out to the farmers and then connecting them back up. There's field to market. There's the sustainability labs. I mean, there's just a lot of places to go and talk. There's different models I would suggest people look at. Again, though, depending on where you're at as a company, I might suggest University of Minnesota. I might suggest New York, the Rosie model that Stern system, School has. There's just so many options, and part of that is because the ag system is not just one commodity or one product, right? And so I don't have a single answer for you, but yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, and that's one of the reasons why I think this is more complicated than other systems. It's not just one organization that you go to help figure it out.
I can understand that. And I think when I'm thinking about, let's say a retailer or manufacturer, and they're purchasing agents, right? They're probably focused on many different ingredients, many different products,
Right.
and they have to actually, in a way, become a specialist in really what's in the bread or whatever it is that
Right.
they're
Yes.
purchasing for their store, or they're for the ingredients they're purchasing to manufacture, to produce the food. They really have to be ingredient specialists in the
Mm-hmm.
end, and to figure that out. But I'm glad you shared. There's a lot of resources. That's good
Mm-hmm.
to know. It is, you do have to do some research, so do your homework to become learn about, right. But I think if you're really passionate about this space, it's easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And
Carrie,
and yeah, I'm happy always. Find me on LinkedIn, and happy to connect. And if I don't know who to talk with or what the answer is, I will connect you with someone else that does. But always happy to have a conversation, a dialogue about what we can do next.
that's amazing. Carrie, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, Amanda. This was great. Appreciate it.